You've heard the news by now. Chris Paul has been traded to the Rockets in a blockbuster deal involving 8 players. And from what I've heard so far, there are both people who like this trade and think it is enough to challenge the Warriors, and there are also people that think the Rockets are just doomed for another postseason failure. And whether or not you like this trade for the Rockets, it seems to come down to one big question, and that's, can Chris Paul and James Harden play together? What's up guys, my name is Mark, hope you're enjoying the offseason as much as I am. To be honest, I'm kinda glad that the Warriors formed their super team because it's forcing every other team in the NBA to really reconsider their rosters and make big moves to try to match the Warriors' dominance. One of those teams is Houston, who suffered a brutal loss at the hands of a Spurs team that didn't even have Kawhi in Game 6 of last year's playoffs. And coming out of that series, something was blatantly clear to me, and that's that the Rockets need a second star. Let's call it what it is. The Spurs figured out James Harden. They realized that all they had to do was stick to the shooters on Houston, force Harden to drive, but sag their big man in the paint and offer him mid-range jumpers, the type of shots that the Rockets and especially Harden hate taking. And so in crunch time, the beautiful flowing Rockets offense that generated a historic number of threes turned into a James Harden isolation fiesta that almost always ended in contested jumpers. Once again, Popovich beat Mike D'Antoni. So in comes Chris Paul, a 12-year NBA veteran that at age 32 is still one of the best point guards in the league, as he showed us in the Utah Jazz series last playoffs. And despite his greatness and statistical dominance, Chris Paul has yet to make a conference finals in his career. Some of that is his fault, like in 2014 Game 5 against the Thunder when he made consecutive mistakes in the closing minutes of the game, or when they blew a 20-point fourth quarter lead to Houston in 2015. But some of that is also not his fault, like Blake getting injured in key moments and the lack of consistency with their role players. Now he joins James Harden, who is by far the best perimeter player he's ever gotten a chance to play with. In his years in New Orleans, he played with Peja Stojakovic, who put up great seasons, but Stojakovic was more or less just a shooter, and obviously not the same caliber player as the runner-up MVP candidate that is James Harden. Now let's address some of the issues that people who are against this pairing bring up. First is the ball dominance. James Harden and Chris Paul both need the ball, and they are both most effective when they have the ball. That's true. At first thought, a guy like Patrick Beverley does complement James Harden perfectly. A solid spot-up shooter that doesn't need the ball and also plays great defense. But history has shown us that it's really hard to win with just one ball-dominant superstar player. The Heat won with LeBron and Wade. The Cavs won with LeBron and Kyrie. The Spurs had their big three. Lakers had Kobe and Shaq. Now, it's a little difficult and it's mostly subjective when it comes to defining who really is a superstar player and who isn't. You could argue that for some exceptions to this two ball-dominant rule, maybe Kobe in 2009-2010 or the Warriors in 2015. But those are quite unique situations. Kobe was still playing in an era where isolation ball was still effective, and the Warriors in 2015 were uniquely equipped with two of the greatest shooters of all time, as well as an elite defense. The point is that James Harden needs a second star to play with, and he himself knew this as well, which is why he recruited Chris Paul to Houston. Now here are a couple of reasons why I do think the pairing will work. History has shown, again, that you can fit two ball-dominant players together and make it work. There are a lot of cases, and we'll just stick to the most recent one, LeBron and Kyrie. Kyrie, before LeBron got there, had an average 30% usage rate, and LeBron was also hovering around 30 to 31%. When LeBron arrived, Kyrie's usage rate expectedly dipped to 26%, but obviously they eventually figured it out. Chris Paul and James Harden were both in the top 50 in usage rate last season, as we would expect, just like Kyrie and LeBron were. A lot of that can be attributed to LeBron's basketball IQ, and while you can't tangibly compare IQ, I think we can all agree that Chris Paul and James Harden have pretty high basketball IQs and have a pretty good darn understanding of how to play basketball, seeing as they were two of the best distributors we have in the league. Unlike Kyrie, both Chris Paul and James Harden are both good passers, and unlike LeBron, both Chris Paul and James Harden are also above average spot-up shooters. Now, is that to say that CP3 and Harden will fit better than LeBron and Kyrie? Well, of course not, because again, there's a multitude of factors that go into the success of any duo. But in uncertain situations like this, the best we can do is use the known to give context to the unknown, and compare the toolset of successful duos to the toolset of this particular duo in CP3 and James Harden. Chris Paul shot 41% from 3 last year, and while James Harden's three-pointer percentage isn't pretty, it's mainly attributed to the fact that he takes so many contested pull-up threes, especially late in the shot clock. With another playmaker by his side, expect James Harden to take more spot-up threes and for him to become a statistically elite three-point shooter. And there's also no worry on defense because the Rockets are swapping one all-defensive caliber player with another. There were also some questions brought up about Mike D'Antoni's ability to make this work, seeing as he's used to building a team around one ball-dominant player like Steve Nash with the Suns, Carmelo with the Knicks, and Harden with the Rockets. And I think that's fair because Mike D'Antoni will need to make a lot of changes to fit in a player like Chris Paul, especially seeing as Chris Paul is an elite mid-range shooter that loves shooting mid-range jumpers, and the Rockets are the most anti-mid-range team in the league. So yes, the offense will have to change, but I'm more willing to bet on the collective basketball IQ of these three guys, and that they will eventually figure it out. And like we talked about, both Chris Paul and James Harden have the tools, both tangible and intangible, to complement each other. Speaking of intangibles, the Rockets are adding an extremely vocal leader in Chris Paul. While James Harden has improved a lot as a leader, he's obviously not the one to yell at teammates and get on them. And to date, that is one of the biggest criticisms of him as a player. Look back in history, and outside of the Spurs who had Popovich, pretty much every championship team had a vocal guy, because in big moments you need that guy to get everyone else focused. There's no doubt in my mind that Chris Paul is a frustrating person to play with because of how competitive he is. That much is known from his former teammates. But for a guy like Harden, who at times shows subpar effort, especially defensively, Chris Paul's demeanor could be exactly what he needs. And finally, here's the last point I want to make about this trade for the Rockets. We've talked about the micro stuff, the basketball fit, and even the intangibles, but let's put this trade in even more of a macro perspective. This trade was, in essence, a huge gamble by Daryl Morey and the Houston front office. They are taking an enormous risk in a player that will be a free agent in next year, and in return giving up a bunch of assets ranging from core pieces to young talents. And no question, just like Daryl Morey said himself, this is because of the Warriors and how dominant they are. And let's be real, this Rockets team, without a third potential star, is still talent-wise below Golden State, and they are still underdogs. But when you're an underdog, which is every other team but Golden State, you need to take risks that have potentially worse consequences, but also potentially higher rewards. And that's exactly what this trade was. When you have a franchise superstar, a perennial MVP candidate in James Harden, you have to do everything you can to pair him up with another star, especially since it's evident with the last 5 years that James Harden alone cannot carry the Rockets, even if he averages 29 plus 11 plus 8, as the only playmaker of the team. Like Daryl Morey said, quote, "Any day you can acquire a Hall of Fame player is a good day for the franchise. It's a weapons race in the NBA, and you're either in the weapons race or on the sidelines. We felt with Harden in his prime, Chris Paul in his prime, this gives us a real shot to chase the juggernaut teams that are out there and puts us right there with them." That's it for today's video. Question for you, do you think the pair is going to work? Or if you have any just general thoughts on the trade, drop it down in the comment section below. If you like the video, go ahead, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you get the videos right when they come out. Going to be breaking down all the big moves during the off season, so make sure you stay tuned. Other than that, thanks for watching. My name is Mark, aka MDJ. See you guys next time. Peace.
Feeling kinda strange, feeling kinda off. Don't know what's really going on. I feel like something's up and I can only guess the cause. It doesn't matter when, doesn't matter where. Always hits me when I'm unprepared. I just feel like it's